This is not science fiction. This is not some Silicon Valley-funded invention. This is raw African brilliance, sparked in a dusty garage, fueled by necessity, and crafted out of society's trash. Meet David Gathu and Moses Kiuna, cousins, tinkerers, self-taught minds from Kikuyu, Kenya, who changed the future of prosthetics using nothing but discarded electronics, makeshift tools, and the unshakable will to help their people. Their story begins in 2012, not in a fancy lab, but in a neighborhood struggling with poverty, where people don't just survive hardship, they innovate through it. One day, a neighbor lost his arm in a devastating industrial accident. He couldn't work, couldn't hold a spoon, could barely live the life he once had. David and Moses watched this man spiral, and they decided to do something that seemed ridiculous to everyone else. They vowed to build him a prosthetic arm, without funding, without training,
My name is
and
David
without
Gathu
permission
Jerry.
from
I am
anyone.
an innovator, a maker.
My name is Moses Kiuna. Since my childhood, I've been curious and a passionate innovator.
And our dream is not only to live 5 years or 10 years, is to live hundreds of years, trying to come up with ideas that will aid the mobility of persons living with disability or help persons who are in need.
Axis sequential testing. Check. Wrist level under radius y-axis sequential testing.
Was impossible. In a small Kenyan town with no labs, no scholarships, and no degrees. They said it was impossible. They said, leave science to the West. But these brothers didn't listen. David and Moses began where most African youth start, with nothing but their hands and their imagination. They didn't attend MIT. They didn't study biomedical engineering. Instead, they cracked open dusty books on neurophysiology. They studied how the human brain communicates with the body. They talked to doctors. They visited hospitals. They learned the science the world had hidden behind a paywall. And then they began experimenting, using scrap e-waste salvaged from local dumping grounds, old cell phone parts, broken circuit boards, dead laptops. Anything the world had thrown away, they found value in it.
To explain to you how we can tap the signal of the branchioradialis muscle. It starts from the upper motor neuron. It then goes, an action potential starts from the upper motor neuron after you have thought of how maybe to grab something. Starts from the upper motor neuron down to the lower motor neuron. Through the spinal tract, the action potential travels through the T5, T6 to the branchial.
And from that so-called trash, they built a device that could read brain waves through a simple headset, convert them into electrical signals, and then move a prosthetic limb in less than 2 seconds. Yes, you heard that right. They created a thought-controlled robotic arm from garbage. While billion-dollar tech firms were holding conferences, these two cousins were holding soldering irons in a backyard shed.
This is upper limb by robotic arm that uses brain signals to operate. This device mechanability deploys 8 degrees of motion. That is, it can rotate along the shoulder level along y-axis and x-axis, elbow level along y-axis and even x-axis. It has ability to twist the wrist or wrist pronation. It has ability to hold and release.
And then it worked. Their neighbor, once hopeless, strapped on the arm. He concentrated, and the prosthetic responded. Fingers moved, hands flexed. Life changed. No one believed it at first. Engineers laughed. Some said it was fake. Others accused them of stealing the idea. But when doctors saw the device in action, the laughter turned into silence. Why? Because even some of the world's best-funded research labs hadn't cracked this level of brain-machine interface without expensive equipment. But David and Moses had. They had no investors, no fancy PR, just brilliance, unpolished, unapologetic, and unstoppable. But still, the media coverage? Almost non-existent. Patent offices? Dragging their feet? Western institutions? Uninterested. Because this didn't fit the narrative. African tech isn't supposed to lead, it's supposed to follow. But these cousins flipped that script forever. People started noticing. Not corporations, communities, veterans, amputees, African clinics, Nigerian doctors, Ghanaian students, Jamaican engineers. They all began reaching out, asking, "How did you do this?" And David and Moses responded not with patents or greed, but with open-source plans. Yes, they made their invention public, free, for Africa, for the world. Because their mission wasn't money, it was liberation through innovation. This is the future, Moses said, but it's not coming from America. It's coming from Africa. And they didn't stop there. When the pandemic hit, the same minds that built thought-controlled arms built a device to sterilize banknotes using infrared rays, helping prevent virus transmission in low-income areas. They also built a green energy generator that turns oxygen into electricity to fight climate change. Ask yourself this: why aren't their faces on magazine covers? Why aren't they giving TED Talks? Why hasn't Netflix called? Because stories like this threaten the myth that Africa is always behind. But let me say it clearly. These two young black inventors have already redefined science, and they did it from a backyard in Kenya. You've heard the headlines. Two young African cousins build a mind-controlled prosthetic arm out of trash. But the real magic? It's in the details. Most people think innovation starts with funding, with grants, with glossy presentations and Silicon Valley handshakes. But David Gathu and Moses Kiuna started with something very different: a personal mission, a community in need, and a burning question. If the brain controls the body through signals, could we intercept that signal and give it to a machine? That question became their obsession, but without labs or university mentors, they built their knowledge from the ground up, literally. They studied books on neurophysiology, many borrowed from doctors and clinics. They spoke to medical professionals, grilled them with questions, took notes, and tested theories in their garage-turned-lab. They learned that the brain sends tiny electrical impulses through neurons to the muscles. And if those signals could be detected, translated, and transmitted, the body could move a robotic extension just like it would a real arm. It's not about the arm, David once said. It's about the signal. Once you can read the signal, you can build anything. Their first challenge? Capturing brainwaves. They couldn't afford EEG headsets or commercial-grade sensors, so they scoured junkyards and local dumps, collecting scrapped electronics, old radios, headphones, broken phones, and circuit boards. They tore them apart and reassembled the pieces into a DIY neuro headset that could sit on the user's scalp and pick up electrical activity from the brain. That headset became the mind reader. Next came the signal processor, a small, self-made computer built from e-waste chips. It translated the brain's analog electrical activity into readable digital code. Then came the wireless transmitter, a salvaged Bluetooth module that could send those brain commands to the prosthetic arm in real time. Finally, the arm itself. Forged from scrap metal, rubber joints, motors pulled from old DVD players, and 3D printed parts they accessed from a local community center. The result? A fully functional robotic arm that could grip, rotate, and lift, controlled entirely by thought. And the cost? Less than $50. Compare that to US prosthetics that cost $10,000 to $100,000. Now pause for a moment. These weren't engineers from MIT. These were two black cousins from Kenya, working with scrap, fueled by instinct and drive. And yet, their prototype moved faster and smoother than many commercial prosthetics backed by million-dollar R&D budgets. Why? Because they weren't designing for profit. They were designing for people. We build what our people need, Moses said. If you wait for someone else to save you, you'll wait forever. And this arm didn't just move. It responded in under 2 seconds. Imagine that. A person concentrates, grip, and the hand obeys. Think, release, and the fingers let go. It wasn't just about mechanics. It was about restoring dignity. Their neighbor, once disabled and dependent, could now feed himself, carry objects, and open doors. He didn't just regain function, he regained confidence. But let's be honest, the Western world didn't know how to process this story. How could two young Kenyans with no formal background, no funding, and no lab access create something engineers in Germany, Japan, and the US were still struggling to build? The answer? Because they had no one to tell them it couldn't be done. They weren't bound by rules. They were guided by need. And they didn't stop at prosthetics. They created a note-sterilizing device to fight the spread of COVID, using infrared tech built from scrap. No big lab, no government rollout, just action. They built an oxygen-to-electricity generator to fight power outages and reduce emissions, because climate change wasn't a theory to them. It was daily life. Their mindset: if we can think it, we can build it. Africa doesn't lack brains. It just lacks belief. And now, medical students are studying their blueprints. NGOs are reaching out. Hospitals are asking for units. But still, no major investor, no blockbuster partnership, no viral Netflix doc. Because global attention doesn't flow to African brilliance unless it fits a convenient box. But we're here to change that. Because the truth is, these two black inventors already created the future. The rest of the world is just catching up. If this story moved you, like, share, and comment below. The future is African.